Welcome to Agent of Wealth Podcast with Marc Bautis from Bautis Financial. In this podcast, Marc helps small business owners and retirees overcome the multiple wealth planning challenges involved in your financial life. We do this by creating comprehensive wealth management plans to guide you towards financial freedom, ensure you never run out of money, and help create a balance in life that prioritizes what is most important to you. Join us for this journey as Marc draws from years of expertise and guest experts to solve the multiple wealth planning issues involved in your financial life.
Hello and welcome to the Agent of Wealth with Marc Bautis of Bautis Financial. Today is a great podcast. Marc has actually brought in a guest, and it's John Williams. John works in the office with Marc, and we're going to meet him right now. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good morning, Marc. How are you?
Doing fantastic. It's a little chilly, but other than that, I'm doing good. Now, you brought John in. John, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, Eric. How are you?
Fantastic. John, what do you do in the office with Marc?
So I help Marc with a lot of different things. Really just trying to ramp up. He brought me in to ramp up the customer experience. So just
Nice.
the planning process and help him out with a little bit of insurance.
Cool. All right. So, Marc, what are we talking about today? Why did you bring John into the conversation?
Yeah, so this show, we got our second episode in our workshop series. John helped put this workshop series together. The first one was we covered Social Security. Mm-hmm. Today we're covering college planning. And Johnson, these workshops were a part of the show here, but also we've done them as in-person workshops in northern New Jersey. So
Nice.
John's on to help with that.
Fantastic. Where are we starting?
So I think when it comes to college planning, there's really two aspects to it. There's saving for college and then actually figuring out how to pay for college. And, we'll start off with the saving piece, and everyone realizes that college is going to be expensive. But a lot of times when we work with someone, or what we want to focus on initially is, when should someone start saving? How much should they save? And then what are their options? So, John, how should someone really approach those three questions?
Yeah, there's it really starts with a conversation, and it's really kind of where our process starts is, there's no one that can, you really can't tell somebody how they feel and how they want to approach this. So just really kind of looking at some of those more qualitative type of things that, not everybody is going to want to necessarily have all the money for college, or they may or may not have the means, but just try to understand where, the client and the person that we're working with is, inside their head, and what's really, really important to them, and really start there and try to understand, just to give you an example. I mean, we have some clients who come in and say, hey, look, I understand college is really, really, it's expensive for the lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect to really save as much money as we need to actually cover the entire cost. But, we want to do the best we can. Somebody else must say, you know what, it's a really, really important priority for us to make sure that we have every penny saved up. So, just understanding how, the client is and what's important to them and where it kind of sits in there in the importance hierarchy, if you may.
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot. Someone comes in and say, yeah, I do want to cover 100%. Tell me what that cost. And then from there, we can start the conversation and look at, okay, how does that fit into the bigger picture? But once someone, kind of decides, okay, I'm, going to start saving, and what are their options for saving? What can they choose and the different vehicles that are available?
It's interesting. You think of a tissue. Sometimes you think of Kleenex. Well, I almost feel like it's the same thing with college planning. You say college planning and someone almost immediately that's standing close by or in the conversation says 529. And it's really become synonymous almost with college planning. And there's a few different reasons, which we'll get into. There's some advantages and some minor disadvantages, but there's some really good reasons as to why that vehicle and that tool we'll use. So the first one I would probably say, and the most important one, is really the way that it's the tax advantages that come along with the 529 plan. And there's very few instruments and investments in the investing world that you can use where growth is never taxed. It's much like a Roth IRA, which we'll get a little into. But that once you pay the taxes on the money before it goes into a 529, and that's really the way the approach is that you're going to pay taxes on as regular income, and then you put the money into the 529. The beauty of that is it'll grow, and you never will pay taxes on that money again. And then the second part of that is certain states, depending on which state you're in and you reside in, are going to have a state tax deduction that you can take advantage of. And of course, we'll work with, depending on where the person who's opening up that plan might be able to take advantage of that. And then if that's just that, is that you'll be able to deduct those, have that state deduction and reduce your taxes from that, in that year where you made those contributions.
Yeah, so I think a lot of states do offer the state tax deduction. We're located in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of the few that do not offer a state tax deduction. So we were actually we're working with someone who is in New Jersey who is moving, however, to Virginia. Virginia does offer a state tax deduction. So one of the strategies would be to have them, once they move to Virginia, open an account and start contributing to the Virginia state tax plan. I think one of the big questions we get is, and just to take a step back on 529s, 529s are sponsored by each state. So each state can offer one or more 529 plans, and they're all different. Some are good, some are not so good. There are different companies that rate them and put them into different classifications. But the question we get a lot of times is, do I have to invest in the state's plan that I reside in? And the answer is no.
Of course, yeah. And the state, obviously the state deduction is going to be a big part of that conversation, but there's going to be a lot of factors within that 529 that we can dive into, whether it be the allocation options you have within it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And I think to really simplify that answer, it's someone can live in one state, they can go to school in another, their child can go to school in another state, and they can invest in a third and even another state's 529 plan. So there is some flexibility, and I think because of that, because you do have choices, the 529s have improved a lot over the past 10, 15 years. When they first came out, people would look at them and say, "Oh, their investment options are not good. There's high fees and expenses," but they've improved a lot. So they are definitely a viable option, and their popularity is only gaining. But the second question we usually get from someone looking into it is, what happens if my child doesn't go to school? Do the 529 plan, do the funds invested in it, do they have to be used for education?
Yeah, and of course you can see why that would be a big concern, because you're dumping all this money in there, and especially if somebody who's planning early, you just don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know where things are going to go. Of course, we all hope that our kids have this great opportunity to go to school, but they may decide to do something else. And I think that it's really important to understand what those options are. And the 529 does offer some flexibility. So it does need to be used for education, or otherwise there will be a penalty involved. It's a 10% penalty, but it can be used for different levels of education. Sometimes if we associate it with college planning, but it can be used for other higher education. You could even use it for yourself. You can even pass it along to your heirs, to grandkids. So, there are some options there. You can look at legacy planning, where it comes into when it comes into the conversation. But the short answer is yes. It is an educate. The reason why there are these advantages is because we want to direct that towards the education.
Yeah, and I think one of the things on that, the penalty is scary, but one of the things that you have to think about, the penalty and the taxes are only on the gains in the account. Since you've already paid tax on the contribution, you can pull out actually the contribution amount at any time without having to pay a penalty or tax on it. So it's not the end of the world there. And John did highlight a little bit on the legacy planning aspect of it. One of the strategies that we do promote is this can be really an estate planning tool. So there's no timeline on when this 529 has to be used. If you take that into consideration, in addition to the fact that you can pass these down, or you can, different family members can use them. So technically, you start a 529 for one of your children, and for some reason they don't need it, they don't go to school, they get a scholarship, you can actually keep investing in that 529, and the amount that could cover one child's school, if it keeps growing tax deferred or tax free, you can actually cover 3 to 4 grandchildren. So it can be a legacy planning tool that's actually pretty popular.
The and to kind of piggyback off of that thought, there's I think it's important to have a side-by-side kind of a comparison, because and I'll use the example of just a true taxable investment account. Like if you just open up an account with us, and that's not going to have basically an account that wouldn't have the tax advantages that a 529 would have. And just to kind of give you a difference, you're looking at complete flexibility. So if we had a client who's like, even with what Marc said, I don't like that 10% penalty. I want way more flexibility. We can go towards a taxable investment account, and that would, like I said, not have the advantages that a 529 had, but gives you can use that money anytime, anywhere. You can pull it out and use it for anything. So whether it's if the kids don't go to school, then maybe you buy the vacation home you always wanted. So there are those conversations, but to understand that it's you're looking at about a 10 to 15% difference on your earning power from those tax advantages that you lose. So, I think that again, it goes back to our planning process, is just helping the client understand the differences in the direction they're going. And they may say, hey, look, you know what? Totally worth it for me. 10 to 15%. Like, that's fine, as long as I have that flexibility. And it all, again, goes all the way back to the process of us just understanding where their head's at and what's important.
Okay. So in addition to the 529, in addition to the taxable account, a couple other options I wanted to touch on. The first one is a Roth IRA. So, everyone or a lot of people associate Roth IRAs with retirement, but there's flexibility built into a Roth where they can also be used for college planning as well. So the way a Roth works is you're able to contribute up to $5,500, actually $6,000 in 2019 per year into the Roth. And it's similar to the 529 in that you're contributing after tax money with the, if it's used for retirement, you do not have to pay tax on either the gains or the contributions. However, you still have that flexibility of pulling the contributions out without having to pay tax on them at any time. So, one strategy is start saving in a Roth. You over time you build up a balance in the account, and you're able to pull out the contributions while leaving the gains in there for retirement. So contributions you can use for college planning or any type. And John mentioned this earlier, and we're focusing on 529's college planning. But one of the new tax law changes, recent tax law changes, you're actually allowed to use 529s for private grammar school, private high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to add to that, we might have a 529 in place, but it's not just use all. I think the beauty of this is we can use all these different options. We can include a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think that the Roth is, really, many times it's one of the first conversations we have. Is including that into your overall plan. And you may use a little bit of that to cover some of the education, to fill some gaps from the 529 savings you were making. You may have a taxable account as well. So again, I really encourage people and hope that people would take the most from this is just an understanding that there's some choices involved.
John, you actually just answered one of my questions. I hope you don't mind me jumping in here. I've got a couple more. But yeah, that sounds great where you can use the 529 and that plus maybe the taxable investment account or the Roth. Having a balance there, I think, is really good. So going back just to the 529, a couple questions. The first question I have is, are you able to use it for supplies for school? Meaning, my son personally, he's a mechanic. And so he didn't go to a 4-year college. And if I had done a 529 for a number of years, I'm assuming that if you go to college that the 529 can be used to purchase books and supplies and things like that. Do you know if they go to a technical school, can it be used to purchase tools and things that they use in a tech school?
Yeah, Ark. So yes, it can. And I guess the high level way to look at it is it can be used for pretty much almost any cost associated with the school, whether it's a vocational tech or a college, with one of the exceptions, or the main exception is it can't be used for travel to and from school. So for example, if you have a child that goes to school out in California, you live on the East Coast, it can't pay for his flights going back and forth, but it can pay for laptops, tools, room and board, and any ancillary cost associated with school.
Oh, that's fantastic, because tools are very expensive. So that'd be great to be able to use that 529. So then this kind of leads into the next question. You were talking about the 10% penalty, right? If you pull it out and you're not using it for school. And you also talked about your contributions versus your gains, right? So let's just say somebody has, and just for my own math's sake, let's say somebody has $400,000 in this 529, which is an incredibly large amount, and their child decides not to go to that Ivy League university that's going to cost that $400,000 to complete. They're going to go to something that's much smaller. They already know that's the plan, and in total, the school's going to cost them $200,000. So now they have an extra $200,000 that could be a problem. Would it be smarter, or I don't want to manipulate the system, but are you able to pull out $200,000 in contributions 6 months before you start paying for any type of college, so that the only money used toward that college is the rest of the contributions and the gains? Or is that illegal or manipulation, or what?
So I don't know if I'd call it illegal or manipulation, but what's going to happen is if you take a distribution out, it's going to be prorated contributions and gains. So in your example, if there was the account was built up to 400,000 and it was split 50-50, half of it was what you had put in yourself, half of it is gains. If, as an example, you took out 200,000 before, 6 months before school, it would actually be broken up 50%. So that of that distribution, 100,000 would be considered your contributions, no tax, and then 100,000 would be considered gains. And because it's not being used for school, you'd have to pay that 10% penalty and the tax on that 100,000.
So you can't just pull out contributions, is what you're saying.
That's correct. So unlike a Roth where you could, with a 529, you can't cherry pick and say, I just want to take out my contributions. They look at it gets prorated looks at the total size of the account, what in that account, what's the ratio between contributions and gains, and then what you take out it follows that same ratio.
Perfect. Thank you very much for clarifying, because that's exactly the answer that I needed.
Okay. So, we covered the 529, taxable accounts, Roth IRA. The one other strategy I wanted to talk a little bit about was we work with a lot of people who like investing in real estate. And there is a real estate strategy for paying for college. And I'll go over it real quickly here. It's not as simple as this is going to seem, but one way of doing it is people like purchasing rental real estate. So if you purchase a property, you have a child, they're born, you purchase a property, you put a down payment on it. And let's just say, you purchase something where you have to put a $50,000 down payment, and it's let's just say $250,000 property. And what you would do is you would put it on a 15-year loan, so that over the next 15 years, you're paying, the loan down. At year 15, you refinance the property. And so you're pulling out some of the equity, and that equity is used to either pay for or help pay for school, and you still keep the property. So it's a way of, buying an asset, having it, rent it, and still being able to keep the asset, yet you kind of using it as a piggy bank to help pay for college. Now, the one caveat is that it has to make sense for, the rental property has to make sense as a cash flowing property. So you don't want to buy something and all of a sudden you have to put in, because the rents don't cover the expenses, $1,000 a month. You want something that at least breaks even, or even better, if it even makes a little money each. That's a bonus if it makes a little money each month as well. So that's a strategy that you won't see a lot of times that advisors will go through. But if people are fixated on purchasing real estate, that's another one that they could do.
So Mark, what if you decided to sell the property? Are you able to use that money towards education? And is there any help with the capital gains on it, or is there anything that would help there, or do you still have to pay capital gains on it?
So yes, you do. If you did sell, you'd have to pay capital gain. If there are capital gains, you'd have to pay capital gains, which is one reason why a lot of times the refinance makes sense, because the refinance is a non-taxable event. So you're basically pulling that money out, and there's no taxable consequences for doing that.
Gotcha. So is there any stipulation on what you have to refinance it for? Like you said, the original mortgage was a 15-year. Does it have to be another 15-year, or do you do a 30-year? Does it matter?
Yeah, you can. You look at it at that time that you're refinancing. After the 15 years, you're looking at refinancing. You look at and see what makes sense to whether it's 15-year, 30-year, adjustable mortgage, fixed mortgage, private loans. Whatever makes sense at that time is what you would. What you do.
Gotcha. So, I mean, again, this is going to really depend on your area, depend on the housing market at the time, and there's a lot of stuff to consider there. Is it a plan that you've personally worked with clients on, and have you found good success with it?
Yeah, we have, and like I mentioned, we do work with a lot of people who like investing in real estate. And I think, John touched on this a little bit earlier. It's there's a lot of different options, and a lot of times, it's not just one option. You want to come up with a strategy that works for what makes sense, what you're comfortable with, and what you're towards what you're trying to achieve. And we kind of touching upon how we work with clients on this. We'll get that initial strategy set up, but it's not, okay, I had a child, let me come up with this strategy. I'm putting this much into a 529, or I'm saving this much in a taxable account, or I'm buying a real estate property. And then, I'll see you guys again in 17 years when my child is ready for school. One of the things we'll talk about is we do a yearly progress report with the clients we work on.
Yeah. And I think that, just to piggyback again on what Marc was saying is it really comes down to what the client's comfortable with. I mean, and that's across all the different progress reports and the different planning we're doing, but when it comes to real estate, that's just what they know, and that's what they like. And that's, and it's not up to us to try to convince them that the 529 is better than the real estate. I mean, even if that's the case. And that's really the approach we take. But we have a lot of really amazing, in the world of technology that we're in, we've adopted some really great tools that really help our clients keep the finger on the pulse of this whole process, and understanding, how their progress is, or how they're progressing through what we're calling our wealth center. And we give them access to really how they're approaching their goal and how they're tracking towards that goal. And we, of course, meet with our clients, at least once, if not 2, 3, 4 times a year, just to go over, see how we're doing, see anything that it has changed, and if there's any adjustments we need to make, because we don't have crystal balls and we don't understand exactly, what could happen over the next couple of years. But we want to make sure that the most important thing is we're going to readjust those plans, and college planning is no different.
Yeah. John, I don't want to assume anything, but you sound a lot younger than Marc and I. Is that about right?
Actually, me and Marc, we're pretty close. We both graduated around the same year from college. And right. I don't know, I guess maybe I just have that
youthful vigor.
Well, everyone says they hate the way their voice sounds. Yeah. To me right now, I have this really deep voice. And I sound very, very masculine. And then I'm going to listen to this podcast and I'm going to think, wow. But no, okay. I do get that a lot.
And the reason I ask is because when working with clients, it's nice to be able to have the snapshot of someone. So I'm a grandfather. So just to let you know, so I'm a grandfather, and I have my view of what college was, 25, 30 years ago, and what the cost was and how people saved for it. But today it's so different, and colleges are so much more expensive, and we all hear about how millennials are struggling to even buy a home and so on and so forth. So I really think that would all play into the conversation for new parents, or parents that, have kids that are 5 or 10, are just thinking, okay, I really do need to do something right now. I bet that would be a conversation that would be a little bit easier if you have a couple different viewpoints. Do you find that when you're talking to your clients?
Marc, I'll step in here, but I think the answer is yes. And I think we as advisors can kind of see it from both sides, right? Mm-hmm. So we see the new parent, and we obviously know, okay, yeah, you need to start saving and save as early as possible. But we also see it on the flip side. We work with people who have children that are coming out of college and are saddled with this huge student loan debt.
Yep.
So, we can talk about the importance of saving to a parent from experience, and not that necessarily we've gone through it ourselves, but we see, kids are coming out of school now with these mortgage-like payments for student loans. And you couple that with, some are having trouble finding jobs, and it just snowballs into something that's really out of control. So we use that to stress the importance of, starting early, saving as much as possible, and even knowing that, if someone has 2 children, 3 children, more, or more children, it's almost an impossible task to fully fund 100% of their schooling. But it's really important to just, get on track and do as much as you can with it.
Yeah. And guys, I appreciate all the information. We are running low on time. I know we have a lot more to cover. Mark, would you bring John back for us?
We will. So, we, as part of college planning, we talked a little bit about saving for college today. What we'll do on our next show, we'll focus on, so someone saved for college. Now, how do they go about approaching the decision on how best to pay for college? So we'll bring John back, and we'll focus on that on the next show.
All right. Thanks, guys, for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
You bet. And thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast with Marc Bautis. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Mark comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And if you've got friends or family members that are getting to this point, or they have young children that need to start thinking about it now, just like Mark said, just like John said, the earlier, the better. Share this podcast with them and let them know that the next one is going to be covering even more information. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Bautis Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Agent of Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Bautis Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment and financial planning.